fellow guitar nerds and YouTube friends, my new YouTube friends. I'm getting used to this place, starting to really enjoy it, feel at home. We thought we'd do an episode today that just basically fielded some questions that you might have at this juncture of our new relationship. So Robert's going to feed them to me. I'll see how good I can do answering them.
Yeah, so this one's from Red Guitar Rocker. He says, can you recall from your formative years as a young guitarist any catalyst that set you on the path to the player you became?
Boy, that's vast. I mean, I can't remember how much I've told all of you about my history. I grew up with two parents being wonderful musicians. My mother's a classical pianist. She was teaching when I was very young. I always had students in. She was either teaching or practicing, so I heard her phrasing. I wasn't at that age probably drawn to classical music per se, but you can't help but have certain bits of phrasing and musicality, harmonics, all that kind of stuff seep in. My dad was an arranger, an orchestrator, so I always heard him writing parts. He was usually on his little electric piano, and so I would hear him going over chord structures. Obviously he's writing it on a music notation. But then I would hear his records after he recorded them. He did a lot of recording in London, so it was a big deal. He'd be gone for a couple of weeks and come back and usually bring some rough mixes. And so I got to hear the way that he was phrasing as a string writer. I think probably that affected most of my my love of fluid and fast runs, that kind of phrasing value that only strings can really get, non-fretted instruments, but it definitely affected me. And then the records during the 70s, specifically probably 75 through 80, 81 or something like that, was the pop music in the United States then. I thought that was looking back, it seems like a renaissance of sorts. It was wide open. It wasn't, the genres were not, marketed as such or as much as they do now. All of what was pop music, I mean, it incorporated, you could hear a James Taylor record, which the early James Taylor records would now be considered country in a lot of ways. You'd hear that budding up to Steely Dan Asia record, right, which would be a jazz record in a lot of ways. You'd hear Earth, Wind and Fire, R&B. There was no hip hop at that time, so the R&B genre, right, and when it crossed over, you heard that in all types of bands, from Earth, Wind and Fire to Gap Band, Commodores. All of this was pop music, and then you hear somebody like Gino Vanelli, who was a combination of all that stuff. It was everything back then. The instrumental records, I remember listening to Larry Carlton the first time, a record called Room 335. Iconic songs on that record. Lee Ritenour was releasing a lot of records at that time too. The Captain's Journey was a big one for me. And we can go into some of these. I think Robert was mentioning that we take a deep dive into some of the cuts on these records. I'll do that in the future. I've mentioned, I'm a Steve Lukather junkie. I love his guitar playing. So when their band came out, I think it was in 78 or 79, Toto came out. Again, that was a whole other avenue of listening, being inspired. So all of that stuff, I mean, I'm leaving out loads of it. Playing in high school, I had a friend, Gordon Kennedy, that he and I would just sit in the halls and practice. We would bring in, what do we bring in? Stuff, the record by a band called Stuff in New York City. I'll talk more about that. I'll leave that, if you want to look that up. I love that band. New York session players, Dixie Dregs, Boston. I mean, everywhere you looked, there was something new. And the idea back then was so non-conformity. So it was the Wild West. And every bit of all of that I can hear to this day. As a matter of fact, we were just out at lunch, and Robert and I were talking a little bit about this episode, and he was playing some Vince Gill music on the way back. And there was a lick, it was like, forget the distortion, something like that. And I realized I'd used a lick like that on the record that I just put out myself. And I knew that had to come from somewhere. I didn't knowingly rip it off, but I sure as hell ripped it off. So anyway, that's a little foray into what shaped me, all of that stuff. I hope that answers your question.
Gil Torres 7 says, "Hello Dan, just wondering, where did you study? Who did you study with? And do you read music when you're doing studio work?"
Ooh. Let's start with the last one first. I'm supposed to be able to read music, but I'm a guitar player, right? How many of you guys read good music? We seem to be at the lowest part of the food chain being guitar players, right? I don't know what it is, but we get this pass on this. Now, I know some great readers, studio players that I've worked with. I'll tell you somebody who was ungodly good when I was playing sessions out in Los Angeles was Paul Jackson Jr., Dean Parks. Those guys could read the phone book and never look down at their guitar. I didn't come up through guitar lessons like that, so my reading was at very best remedial. I could get by in some situations by the hair on my chin, basically. And reading was it wasn't important to me as a young guitar player. Not because it was a conscientious decision, it just wasn't around for me. I spent most of my time using, needle drop on a vinyl record. That's where I got most of my input. So working backwards, who did I study with? I studied very little with professional teachers. I think I took some lessons when I first started playing guitar in a local music shop to get some chords. We were playing, whatever, James Taylor. I don't even know that song. That's so sad. I can't remember. But I would learn songs like that, right? I took some classical lessons from a wonderful instructor here in Nashville named John Knowles, who I haven't seen since I was a teenager. But again, and I took some piano lessons. All my lessons were short-lived. I had a jazz instructor, I think once for, I don't know, maybe 4 months, and he was great jazz. His name was Billy Phillips, I'm wanting to say. Huff's Music in Franklin, Tennessee, coming back to me. He was great. I was more interested in seeing my girlfriend at that time. And so I would get what I wanted to out of these lessons and immediately would just go to my practice room, which was my bedroom, and then go down the rabbit holes that I wanted to play and what I wanted to sound like. If I had to do it over again, you didn't ask this, but I'm thinking about this. Would I do it like that again? Probably. I don't think there's any merit in not having education. Well, actually, I take it back. If I could have had both, I think I would prefer that, to have kind of side by side, enough time without the teaching, and then having a little bit more book sense. My dad, who was one of my best friends all of his life, you can surmise he's passed away, so I speak in past tense in most ways about him, but he's still obviously in here with me. But my only critique of his being a wonderful musician and being a father, I said, why didn't you push me more in music? And his reply was really quick. He just said, you were so possessed with it. He said, that's the last thing I wanted to pile on. And so he pushed me in some other things, because I think maybe I was alluding to something like that, like yeah, it should have been nicer to have a little more book smarts so that I could kind of dance in some of these other areas when I was playing on movie soundtracks and television soundtracks. I wouldn't have had to sweat it so hard, but somehow I made it through. And I think ultimately with this instrument, we're given a lot more latitude because it's an anomaly for a lot of the composers. So if you have a good sense of recall, memory, you can kind of get by, and that's what I did.
You guys will have to forgive me. I'm going to butcher some of these names. This one's from someone from the Netherlands. Niles Jersma, maybe? He says, hey Dan, love the YouTube series. Great job. My question is, how did you manage to be able to play some of the licks up to speed that you play? How did you practice them at a young age? So kind of like building that speed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked if I used to use metronomes and stuff like that. I don't think I had a metronome when I was young. It was imitation. That was really what it was. And at that time, our technology was limited, so there was not really good half speed, 3/4 speed type way of doing stuff. You could, I think, on a tape machine, do a half speed, but it was so blurry. It was almost indecipherable, one of those. So I think the answer to your question was, I heard licks that I would gravitate towards, like on other records, and I would imitate them. And I never could get it 100% accurate what they were playing. I wasn't, because of what I just mentioned a minute ago, I wasn't a great transcriber. So I think that allowed me, in retrospect, a little bit of freedom on that, because I wasn't so honed in on being exact, to the script with what somebody else was playing. But I'd listen for, what I enjoyed was fluidity in playing fast licks. So when I heard a fast lick played, yeah, I would play it over and over and over again for weeks, months, whatever time it took to get to that point. I remember one time I wasn't a starter in basketball, but I had to play like 3 sports a year in the high school I was going to. And I remember one time one of my coaches, dear man, but I think I just wore him out, because when I was sitting there on the bench, right, during a game, I just got bored. If I'm not playing, and what am I going to do? Watch the game? Well, that's what I should have done. But I was always thinking about playing the guitar. So I was sitting there one time in the middle of a game, and my coach noticed I didn't have the guitar in my hands, but I did in my mind. And I was working out this one lick. I don't know what the lick was, but boy, did I get a mouthful from him. That, it was repetition. There was no magic, kind of pill that I could take to get me from point A to point B. And a lot of it was, I probably had some wrong technique, wrong fingerings, which maybe, at first kind of stood in my way and impeded me getting to that point. But I think what happened is that it also forced me to kind of zig and zag and find my own way of doing something. So again, it wasn't the technique that I was captivated by. In the end, it was just having that kind of run. You were asking about faster runs. Having those runs sound, when you hear an orchestra, just move up and down like that, you felt like, always felt like something was taking off wind. That's what excited me. And just playing it technically right, if it sounded too sounded too much.
I say scaly.
Scaly, good. Yeah, too much like a scale. That wasn't, other than getting some of the technique, wasn't my main focus. I wanted it to move me. So it was all on a need basis, and that's kind of how I've done pretty much everything in music. Just when you find something that evokes something in you that you want to go for, then just go down until you can make it a reality within your own playing. And then usually you'll find some other kind of detour that takes you somewhere else that maybe that's where you wanted to go in the first place.
Who were some of the guys that you listened to? I know you've mentioned Al DiMeola before.
Yeah.
That you felt had that speed. It wasn't like a scale, but you enjoyed that, like.
Yeah, he was like a machine gun on some of there's a record called Elegant Gypsy, and if you guys want to hear something that would be indicative of that technique, and remember, it's back in the 70s, and this was not wholesale. I mean, this was not like everybody could do this back then, and or they didn't have the platform from which to build, I should say it like that. Certainly the younger players today are so much more gifted in that area. But if you want to listen to Race with the Devil Down the Spanish Highway, that's a great one. Steve Morse with the Dixie Dregs was another one. He was a little more chicken picking. But the dexterity and the fluidity of those guys, that really was something that attracted me.
So this one is more of a gear-oriented one, but it says, what guitar pick do you use, the exact kind and brand, thickness, and string gauge and brand?
Okay, brands, you're going to get me on the brands. What I'm holding in my hand today, this gives you an indication of how religious I am about brands or anything. For most of my life, I think I've used medium Fender picks. Now, in my 20s, I take that back, my 20s, maybe 30s, I would use these little Gibson. They weren't the smallest teardrops, but they were the next size up. They're a little more rounded, and I would use medium picks. Medium picks, all that kind of stuff. It allowed me that flexibility. Now I'm playing heavier picks, and the reason I'm playing heavier picks is because the music that I'm attracted to, which is kind of what I tried to do when I was recording my own music about a year ago. I'm playing softer. I'm not playing as much rhythm, and I think tonally I'm more attracted to a thicker pick. I'll play some with my fingers, but overall, what I write and what I gravitate towards, I need a pick because I'm shuttling between playing slow passages and then trying to have some quick bursts, and I don't have a technique with my fingers like that. So Fenders. I mean, Rev made me. I don't know where it is. Oh yeah, see what this one is here. Rev amps made me these cool picks.
I think it's a 88, maybe.
This one says 71.
71?
What's thicker? I think they made me two.
Yeah, I think Dirk made you one that was in the 70s and one I think was 88.
So 80s thicker.
Yeah.
I would probably use the 80s. I mean, this feels pretty good. It's a little heavier than a medium.
Yeah.
It's got a cool picture of my butt on it, so I like that. It's just more than that. So anyway, but if I'm playing a rhythm part, then I will downshift and go to a medium pick. And I feel most, this is a Fender. I feel most confident with this shape of pick now. And I think the transition, to be totally honest, it came when I wasn't playing guitar as much, and I couldn't find those Gibson picks anymore. They just didn't seem to be in the stores. Too lazy to order them online, and so I just started playing Fender picks. I've never been really, that wrapped up into them. Was like whatever was available. Strings, Diodarios, I endorsed them most of my career, so I'll use their strings. That's the brand. As far as gauges, it just depends on the guitars that I'm using. I would say the gauge that I've used mostly in the last 20 years have been 10s or 11s. And since now that I'm joining all of you on this YouTube platform, and I'm trying to go back and do a little bit of the old glory days when I played in a band, I've had to talk about downshifting. I had to put 9s on some guitars because I couldn't play and bend like those songs required. So, and it's interesting. I think these, on this Tyler guitar, I think these are 9 through 46s. So I still have a little bit of heft on the bass strings, but I can it's like, for me, I've always wanted to be able to just having that kind of whoops, nice one. 10s, I don't think I have the muscle mass in the old fingers to use 10s, or certainly not 11. So I'm playing 3 different gauges, and it makes me play differently when I play those gauges. If I'm using more distortion, which I would on like talking about the Giant record, or even on some of the new stuff that I'm doing, it's kind of a tweener. But it's easier not to have to fight quite so much. If I'm playing cleaner tones, probably the heavier strings. I like the way it sounds.
I have a question that's not on here, but I've seen it pop up. People are asking about a Giant reunion.
Oh, there we go. A Giant reunion.
Yeah. So keep seeing them pop up. Is it going to happen?
Giant exists. You mean, I'm assuming you're talking about the original cast members.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that it could ever. It's interesting because I'm my brother. Obviously, I'm very close with my brother, so I would love to jam with him. Mike Brignadello lives here in town. Mark Oakley lives in town. Mark was not, I guess, technically in the band, but he toured with us the whole time. Alan Pasqua has moved on to other pastures. He's one of the world class pianists, jazz pianists, and educators. I don't think Alan would have as much interest. Of course, I'm speaking for him. Maybe I shouldn't speak for him. But I think the one key thing is the singer's never coming back. Whoever that guy was, he said he basically flipped me off and said, "Nah, I'm not singing anymore." And of course, I asked him why. He said he couldn't hit those notes, and singing was way too much work. So you can put two and two together on that. I will say this: this is not an advertisement, but it's just the truth. I booked my reunion tour, the Dan Huff Band reunion tour, which is one show, and it's the farewell tour also, as far as right now. I booked a show in December here in Nashville, and I'm gonna play my record. But we're gonna play some Giant songs. So yeah, that's gonna be. She just said, "Come on, Dan. Everybody likes instrumental stuff." Well, she didn't say everybody likes it because I don't think she likes instrumental stuff. But she said you should pepper in some of that stuff because people like that, and there's going to be some singing on it. So Mike Brignadello could not do it that night, and it's the only night that I could get the whole band. It's like juggling quite a bit of things. So we're going to have to do it without Mike. At some point, hopefully we'll do it again with him. My brother's going to come. Mark Oakley's going to be there. And then there's going to be, since the singing is not going to happen by this vocalist, ex-vocalist, Brian Cole is going to come over and sing. And then there's a couple other singers who have expressed interest. I'm not going to mention their names because we actually haven't put this thing out for sale. And December can kind of be a little dicey schedule-wise, so we'll see. But there's going to be some Giant songs. Answer to your question, Giant reunion, no.
So this one's from Greg English Music. He said, "Hi Dan, great channel. When you were using chorus in the '90s, the country stuff, did you switch to this TC-1210?
Interesting. No.
And did you use Did you use the two chorus method in the '90s?
Yes. Who's this to again?
Greg.
Greg. In the '90s, I was using the same Bradshaw rack that I was using in the '80s, so it was the same thing. It was Dimension D and a tri-stereo chorus clone. Songbird was the one I was using for no reason other than that's the one I bought. The TC, I think there was a TC, but I was using it as I was using a delay. 2290, I think that was. I can't believe I remember that, right? So I always use the two chorus thing on this board. There's a little, I don't know what it sounds like because I was messing with it the other day. Yeah, depth is maybe a little much there. Yeah. And for the second chorus, I use this little Boss vibrato. Just a little bit on the vibrato side, and I use it more as an expression pedal. I'm glad chorus pedals are starting to come back in. So yeah, a lot of utility in using two choruses, definitely.
The next thing that I see a lot of people asking about, this isn't a specific question, but since you've been using your blue Strat, a lot of people want to know what it is.
Oh, yeah. Great story on this one. Must have been in the early 2000s. This is a custom shop. And I was down at a rehearsal hall in Nashville. And the artist that I was producing, and I can't remember who it was. Isn't that horrible? they needed a guitar just for rehearsal, and in this rehearsal hall, basically they had in the middle of the rehearsal hall they had some retail places, because all the big tours were rehearsing there, and made sense to have some representation of some of those products. And there was a Fender, little shop in the middle of this thing, and so I just said, "Okay, can we borrow this?" And the guy was really kind. He'd known about my career as a guitar player, and he said, "Yeah, just take this thing." Well, anyway, so we did the rehearsal, whatever it was, and I just started strumming on the thing. And I thought, man, this is great. I really like this, and I think I don't know what, it's a custom shop. I don't. Something wants to tell me that they were saying it was a '59 reissue, but I'm probably wrong. You thought it was a '60 something, right?
Yeah, it didn't. It looked like it was a veneer on the board, not a slab. But I could be wrong. I'm not like a Strat aficionado.
Little teeny frets too. I mean, it's like, it's kind of cool. I thought they had even a cigarette burn on this. Maybe they don't have it on this one, but all the relicking. It looks like a deal. I think it's just a good piece of wood. I've never been too picky about whether it's real vintage guitar or not. I just like the way they feel. And this one sounds great. I've used it on a lot of records.
This one from Jack. He said, "Hey Dan, I've had the honor of getting to play with you a few times. I'd really like to hear some of your stories about working with Jeff Porcaro, Mike Landau, and even Steve Lukather talks about you briefly in his book."
Yeah. Who's that?
Jack. Jack I. Kincaid?
Oh, Jack Kincaid. Jack. All right. Stories. Yeah. I'll tell you something I guess you wouldn't expect from a guitar player is how much a drummer could be an integral part of your musical life. Jeff Porcaro, for those of you who know who he is, so much has been said about how great he is, and I don't think you can overstate it. He really was that guy. The best way I can describe Jeff is when he was in a room, it elevated everybody around him. That's just that, and that's such a quality. He was humble. He also had extreme amount of confidence. He knew his worth, but he was an advocate of every other drummer. I mean, he was always interested in what the other guy was doing. When he got to the sessions, this was in my 20s, so he was always there early. He was a consummate pro. I remember, I'll tell you two quick Jeff vignettes that I love, and this is by no means this doesn't cover anything, but he meant so much to me, and I was so in awe of him. I remember one time, back in those days, we were all double scale in Los Angeles, and there were several guys that were triple scale. But the idea was, so double scale, for those of you, I mean, you can pretty much figure it out. It's whatever the scale the union determined. We would, because we were playing a lot of big records, the market would pay us twice that for what we were bringing to these records. Certainly Jeff could have gone triple, quadruple scale, and would have rightfully so earned that. But we were doing a weekend gig, and it was some international record, and a lot of the players out there, basically, if you work on the weekend, this is back in the record industry when there was just so much money floating around, right, in record budget. So you have to take that into context. But I meekly asked Jeff, and this was just a question. I said, "Do we do triple scale on the weekend?" Because that would be how the union, the musicians union, would say, "No, weekend you charge more than what you do." And I'll never forget Jeff's reply. It was so quick, to the point. It cut me off at the knees, basically, and it was good. He said, "No, we don't do that shit." Basically, what are you trying to rape these people? I mean, that's what it was about. Come on, don't you make enough money? Was what he was saying. And of course, I just was, again, lesson learned. But the fact that somebody of that caliber would say that, and he had that rolling around. It wasn't all about Jeff. That was what it was about. His bandmates could tell you, go way more in depth, but his character, he just had a sense of fairness, and again, he always pushed it away from himself. It was about the music, getting it done, the job, and I really appreciate that. The other story that comes to mind amongst a bunch of stories was the first time that I played with Jeff, and this was more on me having to learn something about time. Up till that point, I'd been playing so many records with world-class drummers. Like, I'm dropping names and I'm going to pick them up. And this was like me in a candy store. I was working a lot with John Robinson, and we could go on these stories about all these guys because everybody has their thing, and I learned from all of these guys. John still is, he is a human metronome. I mean, that's just all, it's just, and this is before Pro Tools, before you could fix anything. It's just like his sense of time. When you listen to a click track and John was playing, the click track went away. He did not, he had this superhuman sense of time. It was just extraordinary. And so, and there were other drummers, Mike Baird, I was playing a lot with him, and a couple drummers that kind of, they basically processed time like that, and they were just, it was staggering, right? First time I played with Jeff, I don't remember which record it was on, but I do remember that I felt things were moving a little bit, and I kept, of course, I'm thinking it's me. It's like, what have I lost my sense of time today? And I didn't realize, and then I realized that Jeff was moving around the click, and I kept thinking, oh my God, this is gonna. I was abject fear that I was going to be exposed as not being able to play with one of the world's greatest drummers, and it's just the way Jeff processed time. A click for him was not. It was a suggestion, basically. It wasn't that he couldn't play exactly to it. He just didn't. That's not what was pulling him. And so for him, he was able to hear that and move around, and he would do it, quite on purpose. That was the deal. And so once I realized that, I just, if I could ask for less click in my headphones, all of a sudden it made all the sense in the world. So all of a sudden, all these slight rowels, right? You go back, or sometimes he even said, I want us to feel like we're accelerating into a chorus. That's how music is. If you go to see a symphony, there's not a click track going with this stuff. Music, in that sense, it ebbs and flows. And that's what he was after, the tension. I never will forget that day, because it was once the light went off, it was like, I get it, and once you would go into the control room and hear what it was, the final take was, you totally understood it. But that was a little tough at first. I think there was something somebody showed me the other day on YouTube, of all places, where he mentioned one of those sessions, and because he said, yeah, there's this young guy, Dan Huff. I liked hearing that. And I can't remember how he framed it, but he was talking about, he reacted to the fact that I was reacting to it. And I thought that was so cool. And he was much, much more explicit in the way that he described it. So maybe you can Google that sometime. Steve Lukather, I only got to play with Steve in one session, and it was a song that I'd written on a Boz Scaggs record. It was called Right Out of My Head. It was on Other Roads record. And the producer, Bill Schnee, told me that I could have another guitar player, because there were two very specific guitar parts on this one song. He said, do you want somebody else to come and play the power chord part? And I said, anybody? He said, anybody. Steve Lukather? Yeah, I'll call Steve up. And hero. So he came in and just, the thing about Steve is, it is absolute I don't know what Steve would tell you. I mean, he exudes confidence. That's how I perceive it. He just is that guy. And same thing, he was sitting, right here. And I'm just, everything that he plays sounds like he's a 10, I'm about a 1 the whole day. But it didn't matter to me because I was in the presence of somebody who inspired and made me better. I don't really have many stories of playing with Steve because we didn't. That was a great day for me. I mean, we have become really good friends over the years. And, we speak, and I try to go here and play whenever he's playing with his band or any other time. But he's Steve Lukather. What can you say about that? Mike Landau, same thing, except Mike and I were in the trenches together when we were in our 20s. And I got a chance to play with him, at least every month, if not more. And we'd be called in, and depending on what the producer saw as a strength or of either one of us, I mean, we had to cover a lot of the same things. His rhythm playing, everything with Mike is just, everything's fat. That's the way, everything he plays seems fat to me, like the right kind of fat. I would always lean over, we had similar racks, similar guitars, all that kind of stuff. But I was always looking at him, how come that sounds so much better than mine? Mine sounded like a little twig, his like this is big log, What I found out was that he was hearing some of the same thing, maybe not the exact same way, but I learned young that we all hear the other person as having something that we don't have. So I had to take that into context with what I was feeling when I'd play with him. It was all this stuff. You know what it was? Abject insecurity. And looking back on it, I realized that I was in the best training camp of the world to be able to sit down. I was invited to the party, right? And so, I mean, I'm not being overly modest here. I was really good at what I did. So I was invited for a reason. But I was more interested in what they were saying, what they were doing. And I realized years and years later how much it just lifted me up. Moral of the story, right? Point of the story. Always try to play with people that you deem better than yourself. It's humbling, but the effect on your playing it'll be worth it. It'll be worth all the humiliation and all the insecurity. Those guys and a ton more,
This one might be too similar, but you can see, I just realized you responded to this one a little bit and said it was a great question. Dev 1967 says, apart from the inspiration of Lukather and Landau provided, what else did you learn from those guys back in the day? Yeah,
that's a little bit of an overlap. It's just how to be a pro. Now, here's something I think is really important to realize. I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine, a wonderful guitar player named Kenny Rudd. And Kenny and I were talking about studio players versus non-studio players, and the conversation was pretty much it was kind of a weighing system and measuring, and we both came to the same conclusion. There's just different skill sets. You all have seen great live players where you just go, I mean, it makes you levitate when you see them play live. Sometimes that doesn't translate to the studio. There's a different decibel level, certainly. The crowd, the energy, all that stuff, that requires a different way of presenting music, different skill set. Also, you're entertaining people. The studio can be quite clinical in the sense that you can hear a pin drop, and there's nothing like the fear of God being in you, because you can hear every nuance of tuning. That's why I can't remember, somebody mentioned, you tune. I think I said this on another episode. Why are you tuning all the time? That's a habit. When I was playing in the studio, I always had a tuner on, because if you're out of tune in the wrong way, there's some out of tune in the right way that can be beneficial. But let's just keep it to the basic definition of being out of tune. the guitar, the band sounds better when things are in tune, right? Relatively to one another. So tuning was a big deal. Studio guitar players, or studio musicians in general, have to be, they have to be able to dance around to a number of type of different styles, ideas, the idea that, and maybe this is something that we go into at some point talking about this, the role in the studio, but this will be the little teaser for this. Because a lot of, I remember speaking at a college one time, and you could tell that a lot of the guitar players that were there, they wanted to say this, and I think I just said it for them. I said, I feel like what you're thinking, this is we were discussing some part I played on some record, and I said, let's get this out just on the table. All of you can play this part, right? A bunch of nods, yeah. So let's all agree, it's not that difficult to play that part, right? We all agree. And so the question kind of comes in, it's like, well, then how come everybody's not a studio player? And this is just one variable. Well, you don't know, number one, if that was your first idea. Because I've been in sessions where I played something that worked one day, and then 24 hours later, I kind of would go to something that I thought would be kind of reminiscent of that. Let's go to that well again. And it didn't work. So a studio player has to be able to, change like that. No ego, you're getting paid. Also because the studios, at least, now, people have their own studios in their houses. So the monetary side of it is not as extreme. In that time period, up through the 90s, even the early 2000s, studio time was expensive. Studio players are expensive. The whole thing is expensive. And so you have to be able to jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Maybe your fifth idea. You get over the sting of being rejected. Still have to be creative. Your gear has to be perfect. The sounds, you have to be able to go through a bunch of things because you don't ultimately know what's going to be asked of you in that day. Or if you know, you get a few little variables, like if the band's playing something different, you have to change the subtlety of your rhythm part, you're playing with a different drummer, all these things. So getting back to your question, is these guys were just pros. And the amount of experience, I think that was something that, again, you just relish that because you see what the experience of those people bring into any kind of situation, and you kind of just, you're earmarking, you're not writing it down necessarily, that would have been weird, but you're cataloging in your mind. They made that work. They pulled that rabbit out of the hat. Even as simple as, not all record producers or artists are nice, even being able to be in a situation that can be a bit, controversial or whatever, and you just keep your cool. Know that you're gonna land the proverbial plane. So that's what I learned, from being around those guys, and I think what I'm going to do down the line, if you guys are interested in it, I'm going to break down a lot of studio players that I've worked with, and I think in the capacity of being a co-guitarist with them, and then also, because I've spent so many years producing records, I hire a load of guitar players, and I have such a love for each one of their playing. And maybe I bring them into this discussion, and we can talk about kind of how that works. Again, recommendation is the last question. Always reach higher for the players. Invariably you'll get a situation where you're the best around, but you're going to benefit more from being around people that are better than you.
Joris Bowman, he said he would love for you to play or tinker with your old rack. And then he mentions Andrew, is that 80s schmoo on here that bought all your old rack gear.
Yeah.
And he says he could help with this, but Andrew lives in LA, so I don't know.
Well, you mean like a reunion?
Yeah, I think like he's saying like Andrew could bring it over here to you. Or I think Andrew, he redid everything.
I heard about this. That's wonderful. Yeah. That would be fun.
Well, we were just talking about, I don't have all that stuff, but I have the JNP1 and the roll and reverb and all kinds of the ADAs.
Right.
We can put it together, but...
I like this, you know, and this is where I get a little bit irreverent, you know, and I don't know if it's worth, you know, if you think it's this part of the conversation. I tend to be, I don't get too sentimental. I mean, I have a 64 Strat that I'm somewhat sentimental about that guitar because it's been with me for so long. It's been on so many different things. But even that, you know what? I mean, it's not here. I'm at Robert's place again, which is great because he's got all his stuff and it's easy to film. He's running all the machines. He's got great sounds. By the way, I mean, like when we were doing these giant breakdowns, you know, we got a good handful of these, which we'll sprinkle in, you know, through episodes for those of you who are interested. And I mean, I'm not using anything that I used during the giant days, but the sounds are working out great. I'm using my newfound friend, the Rev amp. Right? None of these heavy duty amps. I'm using the Rev. It's 40 watt. When I say heavy duty, I don't mean that this is not a serious. This is a serious amplifier. But it's 40 watts, right? Pretty small. And I'm not even going to a speaker cabinet. I'm going through the aux made by Universal Audio, right?
Yeah.
And
which you had never done before.
But I never. No, I mean it's just. And this pedal board that I have, I love this little thing. Never had a pedal board with this stuff on it, not that I know of. So, for me, the interesting thing is navigating sound with what you have. And there's precedent. You know, I've heard some of my favorite guitar players go in without any gear and they just grab stuff. I'll say this is my experience. Keith Urban, such a great guitar player, such a great stylist. And Keith, I mean, he's become somewhat of a collector of epic scale. He just loves it. But before that, when we were making our first, I don't know, handful, 2, 3, 4 records, he didn't have a lot of gear. And he'd bring his telly and like whatever amp was there, that's what we're going to use. We used a matchless that I had a lot because it worked really good with his style. And, you know, if he was at my studio, he'd just grab, if you want a little thicker tone, he'd just grab the 335 or something like that, or a Les Paul. But was never precious about guitar gear because it was, you know, it's always in the mitts right here, the pause. And part of me likes that. I like the uncertainty about it. I like the challenge of being able to think that I can get from point A to point B with hopefully any piece of gear. I mean, if it's really bad, I mean, no, you're not going to get from point A to point B. But I mean, all this stuff is great. So delays, right? You got delays, and nowadays, if you want it to be a little more analog, usually delays have a little roll off, so you can do a little low pass filter, take off the top end or what have you. Choruses, you know, they're choruses. There are subtle differences in some pedals. It's going to be greater than that, but for the most part, I mean, distortion is distortion, right? Now there are those who love tubes only. I prefer less pedals, but I'm learning to use them because it's easier in some way. I'm not a stickler. It's like it has to be a certain way. I've heard that there's some guitar players that can hear the difference between batteries and powered pedal boards. You know, and I'm sure you can hear it. I've been accused of being able to hear a lot of things that other people can't hear. And I don't know, I don't even know if that's true or not, but it's just that it's where I know where you focus and what you're trying to focus on. That's more important to me than the actual gear that you have in hand. And because I've also found that playing different guitars, using different amps, different pedals, it pulls something out of you that you might not have thought of. Using different gauges on strings, using guitars that I never would have played. I got a Rickenbacker 12 string, a 6 string. I would never have touched those guitars because they looked wonky to me. And this is something that I think Tom Bukovac sold. He said, "You're going to like this guitar." And sure enough, it plays so differently, and it tonally just has its own thing. I have a hard time keeping the thing in tune. I think the neck was broken. It looks like there's a bunch of glue on the back of it, whatever. But it has a thing, and I string it with tougher strings, so I got to fight that guitar. But what I get out of it, it's not like what I would do if I were playing my music, because I need a little bit more touch and a little bit more grease on the neck, so to speak. But that guitar pulls something out of me that this Strat would not do. So I just take that across the board for all the pieces of gear that I have. It's all good. It's like somebody asked me what kind of red wine I like, and I like all red wine. You know, some better than others. But if I'll make this commitment to you guys. If you're interested, I'll try to re-embrace some of this stuff. If I do get a chance to have a reunion, a little tearful reunion with that rack, I'll do it just to hear it. I'd love to hear it. So, but it's not something I lie awake at night and dream about, nor do I stress about.
And then kind of a part two from the same guy, he said, where's it at? I lost. Oh, another question. He said, I've never heard the background story of the James Tyler Black Classic that you used a lot on the Faith Hill recordings live.
Oh.
Would love to know about that one.
Great question. I wish I had a great answer for you. I think Jim made that in the 90s for me, I believe. And it's basically another clone of it's pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, I think it has the same pickguard configuration, volume, mid boost, treble, and then you can push pull, you get the front pickup with the back if you want, or you can have all. I think I call them the taps on the pickup, and I know that's not right. Going from noise cancellation to, I'm gonna have to get this terminology down. I've never had it. It makes the pickups louder or softer. Let's do it that way, right? Step in, Robert, if you know what that.
I don't know. I'm so bad at that stuff.
Good.
My Anderson's that way, and I'm like, when I push it down this way, it makes it thinner. Yeah. When I do it this way,
that's it. That's what this does. But I think it has a Jeff Beck, and I think it has 2 single coils. I think I wanted it to have just a little bit more traditional Strat-y flavor to it. Other than that, it's the same configuration. It's same neck. Wilkinson trem, which has kind of become my favorite. Although I do like the one on this Schmear guitar. It's not a Wilkinson, but it plays great. Again, that's kind of the irreverence that I've always been. I'm not a collector, so it's never really affected me much. But you'll play guitar sometimes. You pick up somebody's guitar and go, God, that's great. Where'd that come from? Oh, that's the 1951 something, and yeah, it's $60,000, $100,000. Whew, does it really make that big of a difference? Only you can make that answer. But no, I think that was just to have another guitar in circulation, slightly, subtly different from my Strat that I played all the time. Probably something that I could have taken on the road. Excuse me. I can't remember if I had that with Giant or not. Probably not.
Brian D. Scott, he said, love you, Dan. Can you talk about how you don't overplay in a live context?
I overplay in a live context. How you like that?
All right, next question.
Come to my gig in December this month, and you will see. When I overplay, I can tell you exactly what that is, and I'm letting the cat out of the bag. So anybody that sees me, if they come and see me play, you can shout out, slow down. I think I overplay when I'm not kind of centered in myself. I mean, I just, when I'm trying to impress people, dangerous, and I think I overplay when I am not listening to the ideas or the space in my head. Like when I run out of an idea and I get maybe a little bit nervous, so I'll just start playing faster. Yeah, that's full disclosure. That's really and it's a battle, because I can play some fast licks, but my goal, I mean, I got a gig in 4 months, right? It's one gig, and I'm putting everything into this one gig. So, but it's because I want to, right? I can't wait to do this thing, and I'll probably flub some stuff or whatever. But I'm hell bent on being in the moment and not overplaying. So we'll see in 4 months whether at my ripe old age I can climb that hill and see if I can make some movement on that. But I think it's just one of those things when you panic, because maybe the best thing is to stop playing for a minute. Like when you see great players, you notice they're not in any hurry. They just stop. Or just hold a note, right? You don't have to say it all. You're not basing your whole ego self-acceptance on how you play one song. I went and saw a gig the other night. It was really cool. I'll talk a lot about Tom Bukovac because I've worked with him for years, and I love his take on guitar playing, his music in general. But I called him after the gig. It was not a shred gig at all. It was I don't even know what it was, like more country, kind of almost standards, right? And Tom I remember they played Sleepwalk and songs like that, and he was so in the moment, didn't overplay anything, and seemed absolutely like there, and not in need of showing anybody anything else other than what the song asked of him. And I called him. I said, "How do you do that, man? Because that's an exceptional quality." And his answer was pretty much what I just said. He just thinks about the song. That's it. I mean, it sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds so simple. When I'm playing a lot of times, and mind you, I've been mostly in the studio, so it's not like I have all this time on the road. Our band was a flash in the pan. It was really quick. And for better or for worse, I've since 17, 18 mostly been in the studio. So I haven't had to contend with that. But thanks. I mean, what you're implying is that I'm tastier than I think I am, so thanks. But it's a good struggle, and I don't mind having that struggle. That's a good struggle to have because it keeps you on your toes. We all just hope to be a little bit more self-aware every time we do something.
Yeah, and if people have more questions, by all means, put them in this video, and then next month, maybe that's the sign. Yeah, the light just died. We will, do another Q&A video.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for the questions, everybody. It really is cool. I love this conversation, and maybe I can ask you guys some questions sometimes, right?
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Throw some questions to them.
Until the next time, though, great. I really appreciate it.